If you've got a front door that you'd like to roll without removing it, then this video is for you. I'm gonna show you my process for doing exactly that. And don't skip step number 7. If you do, then you might ruin all of your hard work. Let's get into it, shall we? So here's the door that we're looking at. It is a brand new flat panel door, and it's got a window or light at the top. And you can see it's got the grills in it as well. So those are those boxes that are inside of the window. And this door is brand new, so it's factory primed and it's got no texture on it. So we're gonna go ahead and do a rolled finish. Onward to tools and supplies. Since we're doing a rolled finish, we're gonna need a couple of mini roller covers, which are these guys right here. And I'm using the yellow stripe from Best Lead Co, and this is the 1/2" nap variety. These work really well. We've had a lot of success with these, and I'm gonna need 2 of them because the door is starting off as white and the finish paint is a really dark gray. So I'm gonna need to use a gray primer on that so that I only have to do 2 top coats of my finish paint. Super common, so if you're doing a big color shift, think about using a dark gray primer to start you off. If not, you can just go straight to the finish paint. So anyway, I'm gonna have 2 of these setups, and I'm gonna be using an 1.5" Corona Cortez because even though we are doing a brush finish, there are going to be some cut ends and things that the roller's not going to be able to get to, so we'll have to use a brush for that. I used gray Fresh Start primer from Benjamin Moore, and then my finish paint was More Glow Soft Gloss, also from Benjamin Moore. 150 grit sandpaper, a drop cloth, yellow frog tape, a screwdriver, a carpenter's blade, rags and paper towels, and also some sort of pan setup that you can dip this into and get paint on it. So now that we've got all of our stuff, we're on to basic prep, and there's just a couple things we need to do to get the door ready for paint. And the first thing I like doing is removing the weather stripping in the frame that the door shuts into. I'll circle back around to that towards the end of this video. Also, I did remove the hardware on this door, so that's the lock set and the handle. This one was super easy to remove and reassemble, so I was really confident in accomplishing that task. Some lock sets on front doors are really complicated to remove and then reinstall. So just be aware of that. If you want to leave the lock set on and you don't feel like messing with that, that's totally fine. I'll talk you through how to paint around that. Then like putting down a drop cloth underneath the door so I'm not getting any spatter on the floor. If the door has been previously painted, I would go ahead and scuff sand the door with some sandpaper and just smooth out any rough surfaces or textures that's on the door. Again, this door is brand new, so I didn't have to do that. I gave it a quick wipe down with my paper towel just to make sure there was no dust and debris on it. Now that that basic prep is done, we're ready to start taping stuff on the door. I did tape a number of things on this particular door. The way that the door opened, the hinges were in a little bit of a weird spot in order to get the heel of the door, which is the part that has all the hinges connected to it. And I taped over that with some yellow frog tape, and then I took my razor blade and cut the tops and the bottoms so it was nice and even with that hinge. I also taped the door sweep, which is the piece of coping at the bottom of the door. Particularly if you're gonna roll the door, it's nice to tape that out so you don't get any spatter on that as you're rolling. And then if you didn't remove the lock set the way that I did, it's a good idea to go ahead and tape at least the top of the lock set as well as the handle so that you don't get any spatter on that. Then it just makes it easier to cut into as well. Also on that note, if you happen to be painting the toe of the door, which some front doors like this one, particularly this exact setup, in my opinion, it looks better to paint the heel and the toe the same color as the front of the door as opposed to the interior. I also taped out the little lip in between the interior of the door and the toe. And this door had a very clear line, just the way that's set up, and a lot of the new ones look exactly like this door. So I taped that out and was able to like paint right into that, and that worked out well. So if your door looks like this, I'd recommend that. In this video, we had already painted the interior, so that was done. I just didn't want to get any of the exterior color on the inside of the door. And also, if you didn't remove the deadbolt and latch when you remove the hardware, like if you left all of that on, you can also tape over those, cut around it, and then cut a little hole for the latch and the deadbolt to come through so you can still shut the door later. But that is it for taping. If you've been finding this video informative, then you may be interested in joining my online community, which is called Paint Your Home Now, hosted on School. Inside the community, you'll find tutorials similar to this one, my interior painting fundamentals course, which is quite thorough, and I'm also constantly working on new content over there all the time. In addition to all of that, you have direct access to me in case you get jammed up on any of your own projects. You can DM me directly, send me pictures, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. I'm in there all the time. If that sounds super spiffy to you, then check out the link in the description. Now, back to this sweet door. So for this door, there was a couple cut-ins that I needed to do with a brush that my roller wasn't going to get into. And I first cut in the heel, so that's all the part that's around the hinges. I did vertical strokes to make it look like one long brush stroke along those hinges. I also cut in the toe right up against the tape that I had that rolled around to the interior of the door, just where the roller didn't get into. I actually was able to roll the entire toe because I had removed all the hardware, which is a really nice way to do that too. And on this door specifically, I also cut in and painted all of the grills. So basically the things that look like mullions on the inside of that window. I did all the parts that were, up against the window as well as the grills themselves. It's just really hard to get a roller right up in there. Also on the bottom, a lot of times, depending on how close the door is to the ground, you may want to cut in a little bit on the very bottom of the door up against that door sweep. So that's another thing that you may want to cut in. Now that all the cut-ins are done, I'm ready to roll the main face of the door. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with the panels, which are those vertical rectangles in the, right below the window. And the way those panels were particularly, I was able to get all of that with my roller. And that's really common with sausage rollers or rollers that are like this little mini one. You can actually jam it in there pretty good and get that little lip on the inside of the panel. And then I rolled vertically inside of those panels to get a nice smooth finish. And then once those two were done, I went ahead and did the rails. So that's the top horizontal piece. On horizontal ones, I'll roll horizontally. And then I did the middle rail and the bottom rail, perhaps not in that order, but that's generally what you want to do. Is just the main thing with those is that you want to be rolling in the direction that that piece is going. So then I'll do the top rail and then come down and do the stile that's up against the hinges, and then same with your mid rail and any of those other things. And usually the last thing that I roll on a door like this is the stile that has the lock set on it. That can be the most complicated one if you haven't removed the hardware. For this door, I'd already removed it, so it's super easy. I just rolled vertically and made sure all of my rolling was smooth and didn't have any lap marks where you're seeing the roller overlap. You just want a nice uniform finish. But if you still have the lock set on there, what I like doing is right before I roll, that's when I'll actually cut around the lock set with my brush. And then when I roll into it, I want to get as much of the roll texture as deep into the cut-ins as I can to kind of hide away some of those brush strokes. It's totally fine. We do that all the time and it turns out fine. And then one thing to just look at and be aware of, once you've got the door coated, you want to police for drips. So a lot of times you can get drips in different corners. If you put it on too thick in certain spots, you just want to either touch that up with a brush or roll it out a little bit better so you have a nice uniform looking texture on the door. So now that the door is primed, I was ready to go ahead and apply my top coats. If your door was already pretty close to the color that you're painting it, you may not have to prime it, in which case you would just, at this point, you'd just be doing a second coat of your finish paint. And just a few notes on that when you're cutting in particularly. What you don't want to do is have a lot of rollover, like really thick cuts that get a lot of brush texture onto the door. So for instance, if you're painting the heel and cutting all of that in, you don't want to get a ton of extra paint from the brush on the front face of the door, because even when you roll over it, by the time you roll it, the paint's probably going to be dry and it's not gonna, you're going to see like roller texture and then brush texture underneath, and that's what you're trying to avoid. That's why it's really nice to use a really small brush for some of these tighter cuts, so it's a lot easier to not get spillover onto those areas that you're going to be rolling. So after your prime coat or your first top coat, you can sand with 150 or 220 grit sandpaper very lightly, just in case you've got any burrs or any little bits of dirt or things that dried into the paint as it was drying. Once you've got the door nice and smooth, you can go ahead and repeat steps 3 and 4 with your finish paint. And so you're just gonna cut in everything the same way you did before, and then roll it again the same way you did before. So you want to just make sure that your roll coats are nice and smooth. As you're building the texture on the door, you just want to make sure you're not getting too heavy a buildup in any one spot, and you want to address the problems earlier than later as far as like your coats go. And then you can keep repeating that process for however many coats you need to do. Generally 2 top coats is going to do it, particularly if you did a tinted primer to start with. But if you feel like you need to do a 3rd coat, that is totally fine. Just get it to where you want. Now, once the door is looking the way that I want it to look, or you want it to look, we can go ahead and pull tape. So pull tape off the hinges, off the door sweep, anything else that we've taped off. You can scrape the glass. I scrape the glass with a little razor blade blade. I was super careful on this one because I'm pretty sure that was tempered glass and I didn't want to scratch it. And then I went ahead and reinstalled all of the hardware. It just touched up a few little spots that I saw when I pulled tape that just needed it. And in general, I like to look at the door and see if I have any holidays or anything that I missed, and things you want to touch up with a little brush. All right, so that brings us to our last step, which is to let the door cure overnight. I like to let it cure for about 24 hours. And the way I do this is, as I mentioned before, I already pulled the weather stripping out from the interior of the door frame. So right where that weather stripping goes, I like to use yellow frog tape and tape it all out. So if the door hits the frame, it's actually hitting the non-sticky side of the frog tape, which won't mar the finish. Most folks are gonna have to shut their front door and lock it at night for like safety reasons. And you can still do that even without the weather stripping. You just have to eyeball where your deadbolt's going in and just kind of look at it as you're shutting it. Crank it over, and then once the deadbolt is locked, it'll keep the door from going too far forward and hitting the tape or anything else. If you don't do that and you put the weather stripping in and then shut the door into the weather stripping as the paint's curing, a lot of times the paint will actually marry into that weather stripping, and when you go to open the door the next day, it'll just tear off the finish that you just laid down, which is a huge bummer. After 24 hours, I'll pull that tape, reinstall the weather stripping, and then you're good to go. If you've got an exterior door that you'd like to stain instead of paint, then check out this video right over here because I cover that topic quite thoroughly. Until next time, y'all take it easy, work smart, and have a good one. Peace.